when Swami Vivekananda, who I would call the first Hindu liberation theologian, actually took this journey from Shabda Praman on your left to the active application of it on your right, he was not appreciated by a lot of people. He was criticized. He was told, holy people don't do that. Holy people achieve enlightenment, and that achievement is beneficial to all of society. But Swami Vivekananda didn't stop at enlightenment. He didn't stop at nirvikalpa samadhi. He had not a linear trajectory straight up. He had a parabolic trajectory like this. It touches the ground back again, but not in the same place. In a place that is informed by enlightenment, an empowered place, an empowerment, an engagement with the world informed by an enlightened consciousness is the most powerful movement of human capacity there is. He brought that to the fore in a way that had not been done before in the stream of spirit that we call the Vedic tradition. The theology engaged with the interpretation of sacred text for evolved consciousness and enlightenment and liberation is systematic theology. So the question that one wonders is, did Hindus have systematic theology? Because that is the question I was asked when I was told I'm making real, reifying something that is not real, that is Hinduism. And why isn't it real? Because it does not have coherent theology. It does not have systematic theology. This is what I was told. I beg to differ. So what is the difference between philosophy and theology? Theology always has sacred texts and the testimony of enlightened beings as its foundations. Theological philosophy can also have sacred texts and the testimony of enlightened beings as its informants. But you can also have philosophy that is completely secular. You can have philosophy that has nothing to do with sacred texts, with visions of insights that arise from contemplative experience. That is the difference. The second question is, all the great acharyas of the spiritual heritage rooted in the Vedas, who were they? They were theologians. They were philosophical theologians. They composed towering systematic theologies. So don't tell me Hinduism has no theology. It has a plethora, a cornucopia of theologies, and there are coherent threads running through all of them. Third, who are these folks? Well, there are many. And just to tell you of the most famous, if you're in this Vedanta society and if you've been here before, then Pujya Swamiji must have informed you, of course, of Adi Shankaracharya, who is the founder of Advaita Vedanta. It's not that Advaita Vedanta was founded by him. Advaita Vedanta already existed. It existed in the Upanishads, in the Brahma Sutras, and it existed in the stream of thought of the Hindu world, of the Indic world, of the Dharmic world. But what did he do? He systematized it. He gave it a structure. And he did much more besides, which we'll speak about later on. And then we have Abhinavagupta, who is famous for the development of Trika Kashmir Shaivism, also a non-dual, Advaitic Theology. Then we have Ramanuja, Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, Vedanta qualified non-dualism. We have Madhvacharya, the famous Dvaita Vedantist who disagreed with Shankara but still had to follow Shankara's canon, Shankara's method of testimony, Shankara's rhetorical style, and is therefore in the same lineage even though he disagrees on certain basic principles. Then you have Nimbarka, Dvaita, Advaita, a Vaishnava Vedanta. Vallabhacharya, Shuddha Advaita Vedanta. Then you have the Goswamis, the medieval Goswamis who were the disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is considered Yogavatar himself by his denomination. And their theological philosophy is Achintya Bheda Bheda Vedanta. Then you have the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And we stand in the sanctuary of their remarkable gifts to human civilization. And recently, scholars, erudite monks of the tradition, have called this Vedanta, the Vedanta of Sri Ramakrishna, Vijnana Vedanta. And then we also have Sri Aurobindo, who developed integral yoga. So, Hindu world doesn't have systematic theologies. I ask you that question. I think the answer must be yes, it does. Indeed, it does. Theology engaged with the interpretation of sacred texts for evolved engagement with the problems of this moment in time, as I mentioned, is constructive theology. It is reinterpretive. Now, just the fact that the Vedic heritage has the tradition of bhashya, commentary, is your evidence that constructive theology is expected, normative, and traditional to the Hindu world and to the Vedic lineage. So again, the question which I've been asked, did Hindus have constructive theology? Well, yes. A sampling just in modern times, Swami Vivekananda, Shivananda Saraswati, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Sri Aurobindo, Padurang Shastri Atavale, and so many more. But I'm thinking more in terms of those who actually had structured reinterpretation and application. Then we have something that is very important, and that is called practical theology. So what is practical theology? It is the study and understanding of how to bring into alignment theological principles and theological practices. So philosophical theology, for example, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, a text which is taught in every third yoga studio down the street, has a very famous statement in it. Avidya asmita raga dvesha abhinivesha panchaklesha. The causes of suffering are not seeing things as they are. The sense of I, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, not seeing things as they are, is the field where the other causes of suffering germinate, whether dormant, activated, intercepted, or weakened. Lacking this wisdom, one mistakes that which is impermanent, impure, distressing, or empty of self for permanence, purity, happiness, and self. The sense of I that ascribes selfhood to pure awareness by identifying it with the senses. Attachment is a residue of pleasant experience. Aversion is a residue of suffering. But clinging to life is instinctive and self-perpetuating, even for the wise. So let's look at this verse. Let's unpack it, because each verse in the sutras, as well known as the Yoga Sutras, the Brahma Sutra, as the Narada Bhakti Sutras, each verse is packed. Each verse has a book inside it. So this verse, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha. Ignorance, egotism, attachment, hatred, and clinging to life are the 5 obstacles. This is a principle. This is a principle. How does it relate to the practice in the suffering world? How does it relate to the suffering of the world? What are its implications for human relations, environmental justice, climate change, spiritual care for traumatized persons and other sentient beings? This verse, if you unpack it, it is the seed of all our suffering and the suffering that we have as a species bestowed upon our beautiful planet. So this is just a taste, just a glimpse of practical theology and of theology as a whole. Thank you so much for listening.